Hello, my name is Eli and I'm 24. I just moved into a small rental complex on the edge of a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. The place is old peeling paint on the siding, creaky wooden stairs, and a mailbox that sticks no matter how many times you jiggle it. My unit is 2A, a one-bedroom with a kitchenette barely big enough for one person to turn around in. The furniture is still half in boxes and the only thing I've unpacked is my laptop and a single coffee mug. I started my first real job as a junior programmer 2 weeks ago, working remotely for a startup that builds inventory software. It pays enough to cover rent and groceries, but not much else. Most nights I eat frozen pizza straight from the box and fall asleep to the hum of my laptop fan. I wasn't looking for anything when I moved here. No friends, no plans, no expectations. Just a fresh start after 4 years of college dorms and part-time jobs that never lasted. The complex is small, only 8 units, 2 floors, all facing a cracked asphalt courtyard where the landlord parks his ancient Ford pickup. My neighbors keep to themselves. I'd seen a couple of them in passing an older guy who waters his plants every morning, a young woman with a toddler who always waves, and that was it. I liked the silence, it felt safe. The first night in the new place was supposed to be uneventful. I'd spent the day setting up my desk, untangling cords, and trying to figure out why the Wi-Fi kept dropping. By 10 o'clock, I was exhausted. The sky outside had turned a bruised purple and the air smelled like rain. I was about to shut my laptop when the first crack of thunder hit. It was loud enough to rattle the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The whole building plunged into darkness. I sat there for a second, staring at the black screen of my computer, listening to the storm build. Rain started hammering the roof like it had something to prove. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and dug through a box until I found the cheap LED lantern I'd bought for emergencies. It cast a weak yellow glow across the room, just enough to see the outlines of furniture. I figured the power would come back soon. It always does. But then there was a knock. 3 sharp taps, loud enough to cut through the thunder. I froze. No one knew me here. No one had any reason to knock. I walked to the door, lantern in hand, and opened it a crack. The hallway light was out too, but a flash of lightning lit up the figure standing there. She was wearing a dark raincoat, hood up, water dripping from the edges. Her face was half in shadow, but I could see she was older than me, maybe mid-30s. Tired eyes, sharp cheekbones, a mouth set in a line that said she wasn't here to waste time. "You the new guy in 2A?" she asked. Her voice was low, steady, like she was used to being heard. "Yeah," I said, still holding the door half closed. "Eli, I'm Rachel. 2B. She gestured vaguely toward the wall behind me. "Power's out in my unit, too. You got a flashlight I could borrow?" "Mine died." I hesitated for half a second, then stepped back. "Hang on." I grabbed the lantern off the counter and handed it to her. She took it, and the light caught her face fully for the first time. Something about her felt familiar. Not like I knew her, but like I'd seen her before. The way she held the lantern, the slight tilt of her head. I couldn't place it. Then she looked up and her eyes locked on mine. The thunder rolled again, and in the flash of lightning I saw it. Recognition. Not just on my end. On hers, too. Wait, I said the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The bus stop. Colorado. Last year. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't blink. "The rain," she said. "You were reading a book. Something about code." "Python for beginners," I said. "You were drinking coffee from a thermos. Said you were waiting for a ride that never showed." She nodded slowly. "I remember. We'd sat under the awning of that dingy bus stop for 2 hours, soaked to the bone, talking about nothing and everything. She'd told me she was a teacher. I'd told her I was failing my algorithms class. We'd laughed about how the rain sounded like static. She'd offered me half her sandwich. I'd given her my umbrella when her ride finally came. No names, no numbers. Just 2 strangers passing time. I'd thought about her for weeks after. Then life moved on. And now she was standing in my doorway, holding my lantern rain dripping from her coat. "You live here?" I asked, my voice barely above the storm. "Next door," she said. "Been here 3 years." I stared at her, trying to process it. The woman from the bus stop. The one I'd never expected to see again. She was my neighbor. She lived on the other side of the wall I'd been leaning against all week. Another crack of thunder. She shifted her weight, the lantern light flickering across her face. "I should go," she said. "Thanks for this." I nodded, still stunned. "Yeah, no problem." She turned to leave, then paused. "Eli, right, yeah." She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good to see you again." Then she was gone, disappearing into the dark hallway. I closed the door and stood there, the storm raging outside, my heart pounding harder than the thunder. I looked at the wall separating our units. She was right there, on the other side. After a year of thinking that night had been a fluke, a story I'd tell someday, she was here, living next door. I didn't sleep that night. The power came back around 2, but I barely noticed. I kept replaying the bus stop in my head. The way she'd laughed when I'd admitted I was terrified of failing. The way she'd looked at the rain like it was an old friend. And now, she was here. Rachel. 2B, my neighbor. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it meant anything. But as I lay in the dark listening to the rain slow to a drizzle, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. Something big. Something I wasn't ready for. The next morning I found a small paper bag outside my door. Inside was an apple and a note in neat handwriting. "Thanks for the light. R." I stared at it for a long time, then looked at the wall again. She was right there. And for the first time since I'd moved in, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. The days after that storm settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. I'd wake up to the soft clink of my coffee maker, the hum of my laptop booting, and the faint sound of movement next door. Rachel's unit shared a wall with my bedroom, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear her if I listened. Not words, just life. The creak of floorboards when she walked to the kitchen, the muffled thud of a cabinet closing, the low murmur of a radio in the morning. I told myself I wasn't eavesdropping, I was just aware. I saw her a few more times that first week, always in passing. She'd be locking her door as I stepped out for a run, or I'd catch her carrying groceries up the stairs while I fumbled with my keys. We'd nod, exchange a quick "hey," and that was it. But every time my pulse kicked up a notch, it wasn't just the bus stop memory anymore. It was the way she moved, like she knew exactly where she was going even if she didn't. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way her eyes flicked to mine for half a second longer than necessary. I started noticing things about her place from the outside. Her porch light was always on, even when she wasn't home. There was a small potted plant by her door, some kind of herb that smelled sharp and green when I walked past. And every evening right at 7, music drifted through her open window. Jazz mostly. Slow, smoky saxophone or piano that made the courtyard feel softer. I'd sit on my steps with a beer pretending to scroll through my phone, but really I was listening. Waiting for it to start. One morning I found a paper bag outside my door again. This time it was a peach perfectly ripe and another note. The apples were from my tree. "Try this." "R." I laughed out loud alone in the hallway. She had a tree. I pictured her in her backyard, reaching up to pick fruit, and the image stuck with me all day. At work, I caught myself staring at my screen lines of code blurring together. My boss pinged me on Slack about a bug I was supposed to fix, and I had to shake my head to focus. I needed an excuse to talk to her again. The lantern had been a one-time thing, and I didn't want to come off as the weird neighbor who kept borrowing stuff. So I waited. And then, on Thursday, I got my chance. I was taking out the trash, wrestling with a bag that was too full when I saw her struggling with 2 grocery bags on the stairs. One was slipping, and she was trying to shift her weight to keep it from falling. Without thinking, I dropped my bag and jogged over. "Let me get that," I said, grabbing the heavier one before it hit the ground. She looked up surprised but not startled. "Thanks, Eli. You're always around when I'm about to make a mess." "Bad timing's my specialty," I said, and she laughed. It was the first time I'd heard it since the bus stop, and it hit me the same way. Low, warm, like she meant it. We walked up the stairs together, her unit just past mine. She unlocked her door and I followed her in, setting the bag on her counter. Her place was nothing like mine. Where my apartment was a chaos of boxes and mismatched furniture, hers was lived in. Books stacked on every surface. A worn leather couch with a quilt thrown over it. A small kitchen table with a vase of wildflowers. It smelled like coffee and something baked cinnamon, maybe. You want a drink? She asked, already pulling 2 glasses from a cabinet. I've got water iced tea or coffee that's probably still warm. Iced tea sounds good, I said, leaning against the counter. I didn't want to leave yet. She handed me a glass and leaned opposite me, arms crossed loosely. So, she said, how's the new job? It's a job, I said. Lots of debugging, lots of coffee. You teaching sophomores, she said, rolling her eyes. They're convinced I'm ancient because I don't know what a skibidi is. I snorted. I don't either, and I'm 24. See, we're both doomed. She smiled, and for a second, the room felt smaller. Not in a bad way, just closer. We talked for a while. About work mostly. She told me about a kid in her class who wrote a 10-page essay on why homework should be illegal. I told her about the time I accidentally deleted an entire database during my internship. She laughed again, and I felt it in my chest. You live alone, I asked, then immediately wished I hadn't. It felt too forward. She didn't flinch. Yeah, for 3 years now, divorced, no kids, just me and a very judgmental cat who only shows up when he's hungry. I nodded, unsure what to say. The word divorced hung in the air heavy, but not awkward. She didn't seem to mind talking about it. You? She asked. Just me, I said. No cat, no judgment. She smiled again, softer this time. You'll get there. I left her place with a container of leftover lasagna she insisted I take. I always make too much, she said. Teacher habit. I didn't argue. That night I sat on my couch eating her lasagna straight from the container, the jazz from her place drifting through the wall. It was louder than usual, like she'd turned it up. I wondered if she knew I could hear it. I wondered if she wanted me to. The next morning I found another note. This one was tucked under my door, no fruit this time. Just a small piece of paper. Lasagna wasn't terrible, was it? R. I grinned like an idiot and wrote back on the same paper, best I've had in years. Need the recipe. E. I slid it under her door before I could overthink it. She left the recipe on my doorstep the next day, handwritten on a yellow sticky note. No message, just the steps in neat slanted writing. I stuck it on my fridge and made the lasagna that weekend. It wasn't as good as hers, but I took a picture anyway and left it under her door with a new note closed, but missing something. Your secret ingredient, E. She didn't answer right away, but that night the jazz started at 7 on the dot, and I swear I heard her laugh through the wall. We fell into a pattern. Notes, small gestures, a bag of oranges, a book she thought I'd like, some sci-fi novel with a cracked spine. I left her a playlist on a USB drive, songs I thought she'd get. She left me a scarf when the weather turned cold, said she had too many. I started looking forward to 7 o'clock, to the music, to the possibility of another note. One evening I was outside fixing a loose board on my porch when she came out to water her plant. She was in sweatpants and an old hoodie hair and a messy bun. She looked tired. Rough day, I asked. She sighed. Parent-teacher conferences. One dad spent 20 minutes telling me his kid's a genius because he can beat me at chess. I laughed. Sounds about right. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You ever feel like you're just going through the motions all the time, I said. She looked at me, then really looked. You don't seem like it. I'm good at faking it, I said. Years of practice. She didn't laugh, just nodded like she understood. Then she said, you know what? I miss someone to talk to who doesn't want anything from me. No grades, no advice, just talk. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding a hammer, feeling like I'd been seen in a way I hadn't been in years. She went back inside. The music started at 7. But that night it was quieter, slower, like she was thinking. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the wall between us, feeling thinner than ever. I wasn't in love, not yet. But I was something I didn't have a name for, something that made the silence next door feel like it was waiting for me to fill it. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't okay with just accepting it. The notes kept coming, but they weren't the only thing anymore. We started finding reasons to be outside at the same time. I'd take the trash out right when she was checking her mail. She'd walk to the corner store just as I was heading out for a run. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew. It wasn't coincidence. It was choice. One Saturday morning, I was wrestling with a flat tire on my bike in the courtyard when she appeared with a mug of coffee in each hand. She was in jeans and a faded flannel shirt sleeves, rolled up hair still damp from a shower. She handed me one without a word. "Thought you could use this," she said. "You look like you're losing a fight with that wheel." I took the mug grateful. "It's winning, definitely winning." She crouched next to me, peering at the tire. "You need a patch kit. I've got one inside." Before I could answer, she was up and heading to her unit. She came back with a small black case and knelt beside me, popping it open like she'd done this 100 times. She worked fast, patching the hole, inflating the tire with a hand pump. I just watched coffee cooling in my hand. "Where'd you learn that?" I asked. "My ex was into biking," she said, not looking up. "He left the tools when he left everything else." I didn't push. She didn't offer more. When the tire was fixed, she stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and smiled. "There. You're back in business." "Thanks," I said. "I owe you." She shrugged. "Add it to the tab." That was the first time we spent more than 5 minutes together without a door between us. After that, the courtyard became our place. We'd end up there most evenings, her with a book, me with a beer or a laptop. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat on the steps listening to the crickets or the distant hum of traffic. But when we did talk, it was easy. Real. She told me about her students, the ones who made her want to pull her hair out, the ones who surprised her with their questions. I told her about my code, the bugs that kept me up at night, the satisfaction of finally cracking a problem. She listened like it mattered, like I mattered. One night the power went out again. Not a storm this time, just a glitch in the grid. The whole complex went dark. I was in the middle of a video call when my screen died. I cursed under my breath, grabbed my phone, and headed outside. Rachel was already on her porch lighting candles. "Join the party," she said, nodding toward the steps. I sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth from the candle between us. She'd changed into a sweater, the kind that looked soft and worn. Her hair was loose, falling over one shoulder. The candlelight made her eyes look darker, deeper. "Second blackout in a month," I said. "This place is cursed." She laughed softly. "Or it's trying to tell us something. Like what?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the flame. Like, "Slow down. Pay attention." I looked at her, then really looked. The way the light flickered across her face. The way she held herself like she was used to being alone but didn't mind it. Not anymore. "You ever think about that night?" I asked. "The bus stop all the time," she said. "I thought I'd imagined you. Some guy who was nice for 2 hours and then disappeared." "I thought the same about you," I said. "But here we are." "Here we are," she echoed. We sat in silence for a while, the candle burning lower. Then she said, "You make me forget how old I am." I turned to her. "You're not old." She smiled, but it was sad. "I'm 35, Eli. I've got a decade on you. A marriage that didn't work. A life I didn't plan. And I've got nothing," I said. "No plan, no roots. Just a job and a bike with a patched tire." She looked at me, her eyes soft. "That's not nothing." I didn't know what to say, so I reached out slowly and brushed my fingers against hers. She didn't pull away. Her hand was warm, calloused in places from grading papers or gardening or whatever else she did when I wasn't looking. She turned her palm up and I laced my fingers through hers. We didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there holding hands in the dark, the candle flickering between us. The power came back on eventually, the porch light buzzing to life. But we didn't let go. Not right away. After that, the lines blurred. I'd find myself at her place more often, helping her carry laundry, fixing a leaky faucet. She'd come over to borrow my blender or drop off a plate of cookies she'd baked for her students but made too many of. We'd end up on her couch watching old movies or listening to records. She had a turntable, something I hadn't seen since my dad's house. She'd put on Billie Holiday or Miles Davis, and we'd sit close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel her breathing. One night I was at her place, sprawled on her couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. The movie was some black and white thing she loved. I wasn't watching, I was watching her. The way she laughed at the dialogue, the way she tucked her feet under her, the way she glanced at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Eli, she said, suddenly pausing the movie. What are we doing? I knew what she meant. We both did. I don't know, I said, but I don't want to stop. She looked at me for a long time. Then she reached out and touched my face, her thumb brushing my cheek. You're dangerous, she said. How? Because you make me want things I thought I was done with. I leaned in slow enough that she could stop me. She didn't. Our lips met soft at first, then deeper. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate, just right, like we'd been waiting for it since the bus stop. We didn't sleep together that night. We kissed, held each other, talked until the sky turned gray. She told me about her ex, how he'd left without a fight, how she'd spent years thinking she wasn't enough. I told her about my mom, how she'd raised me alone after my dad bailed, how I'd never let anyone close because I didn't know how. I'm scared, she whispered at one point, her head on my chest. Me too, I said. But we didn't stop. The next morning I woke up on her couch, her quilt over me. She was in the kitchen making coffee. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something cautious in it, like she was waiting for me to regret it. We didn't talk about what it meant. We didn't need to, not yet. We just kept going, the notes, the music, the evenings in the courtyard. But now there were touches. Her hand on my arm when we laughed, my fingers brushing her hair when she leaned over to grab something. Small things, quiet things, but they meant everything. I started leaving my porch light on for her. She started leaving her window open even when it was cold. The jazz at 7 became our signal. If it played, I'd find a reason to knock. If it didn't, I'd wait. One night I was at my desk stuck on a coding problem that wouldn't budge. It was past 9 and I hadn't heard the music. I told myself she was tired, busy, but I couldn't focus. I grabbed my keys and walked to her door, knocked once. She opened it, hair damp, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants. Hey, she said, surprised. Everything okay? I missed the music, I said. She smiled, stepped aside. Come in. I did. And that night, we didn't pretend anymore. We didn't need the dark or the candlelight. We just needed each other. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I was in the courtyard fiddling with my phone when Mrs. Hargrove from 1C shuffled past with her little dog. She always smiled at me before, but this time her eyes lingered too long on Rachel's open window than on me. She didn't say anything, just tightened the leash and kept walking. I didn't think much of it until the next morning. Rachel knocked on my door at 7:30 earlier than usual. She was dressed for work, hair pulled back, but her face was tight. She held a mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. They're talking, she said the second I opened the door. Who, everyone? Hargrove saw us on the porch last week. Someone told the principal I've been distracted. One of the moms asked if I was dating a student. She laughed, but it was sharp. A student? You're 24, Eli. I stepped aside so she could come in. She didn't, just stood there gripping the mug. I got a call yesterday, she went on. From the district office. Just a friendly check-in. They want to make sure I'm maintaining professional boundaries. She looked at me, eyes glassy. They didn't say your name, but they didn't have to. I felt the air leave my lungs. Rachel, I'm not mad at you, she cut in. I'm mad at how fast it spreads. One look, one conversation, and suddenly I'm the teacher who can't be trusted around kids. I wanted to reach for her, but she took a half step back. The distance felt like a canyon. I can't lose my job, she said. Not over this. Not over. She stopped, swallowed. Over us. The word hung there fragile and heavy. Us. I nodded, throat tight. What do you need me to do? She looked down at the mug, then at the floor. Space. Just for a while. Let it die down. Let them forget. I wanted to argue, wanted to say it didn't matter, that we could keep it quieter, that I'd stay inside, that I'd do anything. But I saw the fear in her eyes, real and raw, and I knew pushing would only make it worse. Okay, I said. Space. She gave a small, grateful nod, then turned and walked back to her unit. The door closed softly behind her. No slam, no drama. Just a click that echoed louder than thunder. That night, 7 o'clock came and went. No music. No light under her door. I sat on my couch staring at the wall waiting for a sound that never came. The silence was deafening. The next few days were torture. I saw her in passing grabbing mail heading to her car, but we didn't speak. She'd give a tight smile, I'd nod, and that was it. The courtyard felt bigger. The notes stopped. The fruit baskets stopped. Even the porch light stayed off. I threw myself into work. Long hours, extra bugs, anything to keep my mind off the quiet next door. But at night, I'd lie awake listening for footsteps, for the creak of her floorboards, for anything. Nothing. A week in, I broke. I wrote a note, I miss the music. I miss you. And slid it under her door. No response. The next morning it was gone, but no reply came. I started running at odd hours just to burn off the restlessness. One night I came back late soaked from the rain and saw her car pulling in. She parked, got out, and for a second our eyes met across the courtyard. She looked exhausted. I raised a hand, a small wave. She hesitated, then waved back, just once. Then she disappeared inside. The gossip didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Hargrove cornered me by the mailboxes one afternoon. "You know she's a teacher, right?" she said, voice low. "People talk. You should be careful." I forced a smile. "We're just neighbors." She didn't buy it. Nobody did. 2 weeks after the conversation, Rachel knocked again. This time it was evening and she looked like she hadn't slept. She held a small envelope. "I need to give you this," she said, handing it over. Before I chicken out, I took it, fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away, but she didn't linger either. Inside was a single key. Her spare. "I'm not asking you to use it," she said quickly. I don't want you to think I'm shutting you out completely. I just need time. For them. For me." I stared at the key, then at her. How much time, I don't know. Her voice cracked. A month, maybe more. Until they stopped looking. I wanted to say no, wanted to say a month was too long, that I couldn't do it. But I saw the plea in her eyes and I nodded. "Okay." She gave a shaky smile, then turned to leave. At the threshold she paused. "The music's still there," she said quietly. "I just can't play it out loud right now." Then she was gone. I stood in the doorway a long time, the key cold in my palm. I didn't go to her that night. Or the next. Or the next. The silence stretched. The courtyard stayed empty. The jazz stayed locked inside her walls. I kept the key on my desk next to my laptop, a reminder, a promise, a wound. And every night at 7 I sat by the wall, ear pressed to the plaster, waiting for a sound that never came. A month dragged like code that wouldn't compile. I counted the days on a sticky note stuck to my monitor, 30 marks, each one a small scar. Work became my refuge. I took on extra tickets, stayed late on calls, volunteered for the weekend deployment no one wanted. Anything to keep from looking at the wall. The key sat untouched on my desk, catching the glow of my screen like a silent accusation. Seattle called twice. The recruiter was polite, then persistent. "We love your portfolio, Eli. The offer's still open. Just need a yes." I let the voicemails pile up. I told myself I was thinking it over. Really, I was stalling. Rachel and I became ghosts in the same hallway. We'd pass each other at the mailboxes, eyes forward, a nod that barely qualified as acknowledgement. Once I held the door for her as she carried in a stack of graded papers. Our fingers brushed. She flinched. I pretended not to notice. The courtyard stayed empty. Her porch light stayed off. The jazz never played. I started running again, longer routes past the complex and into the woods behind it. The cold bit my lungs, but it was better than the silence. I'd come back dripping, sweat, ears ringing, and still check her window out of habit. Dark. Always dark. Then on the 29th night I came home late from a grocery run. The sky was clear, stars sharp enough to cut. I was juggling bags and keys when I saw the envelope. It was wedged under my doormat, plain white, no writing on the outside. I knew before I opened it. Inside was the lantern, the same cheap LED one from the first storm, and a note folded once, her handwriting neat and slanted. "If you leave, take this. It got us through one night. Maybe it'll get you through the next. I'll leave the window cracked at 7. No music. Just in case you ever need to know the light's still on." R. I stood there in the hallway, bags at my feet, the lantern cold in my hand. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with lead. I looked at her door. 2B, 10 feet away. A lifetime. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lantern on the coffee table staring at it until the battery died. At 6:58, I walked to the wall, pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Then at 7 sharp, the faintest click. Her window opening. No music. Just the soft creak of wood and the night air moving between us. I grabbed my keys. The Seattle offer letter was on the counter, printed and signed. I was supposed to mail it tomorrow. I walked to the door, hand on the knob, heart hammering. I could still make it. New city, new start, no walls, no silence. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, her door was closed, but the light under it was on warm, steady, spilling across the worn carpet like an invitation. I took one step, then another. My hand rose, knuckles hovering an inch from her door. I didn't knock. Instead, I knelt, slid the lantern under her door. It scraped softly against the threshold. I stayed there, a second, forehead against the wood, listening. No footsteps, no voice. Just the quiet hum of her life on the other side. I stood, walked back to my unit, and left my door open. Just a crack. Enough for the hallway light to spill in. Enough for her to see if she looked. The next morning, the lantern was on my doorstep. Charged. A new note tucked inside, lights still on. Music at 7 tomorrow? If you're still here. I was. That night, the jazz started at 7 on the dot. Soft. Tentative. Like it was testing the air. I sat on my side of the wall, ear pressed to the plaster, and smiled for the first time in a month. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The music said enough. The light said enough. The space between us, 10 feet, one wall, a lifetime of almost, was enough. I tore up the Seattle letter. Let the pieces fall into the trash like confetti from a party I never wanted. Some loves don't need words. Some don't need doors flung wide. Some just need a cracked window, a charged lantern, and the quiet courage to stay on your side of the wall until the other person's ready to meet you in the middle. I stayed. And every night at 7, the music plays.